So good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you to the third consultation session for the working group with staff representatives. I see that we have representatives of 4 duty stations here with us today. I see that Cecilia, Shaoxin, and Shavona are representing 4 duty stations, and we have Azucena, who is also joining us today. I understand that Rosemary may not be able to join us due to health considerations. So let me go ahead and take a look at the agenda that I have prepared for today. So I say agenda, but these are just basically some loose notes that, hold on a second. I say Rima, I'm trying to connect to the meeting. But she's not sure that she has the right link. So let me go ahead and see if I can call her into the meeting. Show participants.
Good morning.
Oh, there we
I think
go.
that was something wrong, you know, I mean, with my link. I just sent your message.
Okay, sorry to hear that.
No problem.
So just to let you know, Rima, that the meeting is being recorded. Okay,
Sure.
With the understanding that we are not going to share or distribute the recording, it's only for purposes of note taking. Okay, so let me go ahead and start. And of course, now I've closed my my screen. So what I was going to suggest we do today is I've taken the proposals that the staff representatives have sent to me. And what I've done is I've added Roman numerals. So for those of you who want to open a second screen, I would just say that I've considered, I've taken the first set of proposals, which is called, talks about the self-revision workload, and where there's 3 proposals, that's proposals Roman numeral 1. And then I've taken the second set of proposals, which is about crediting, and I've called that proposals 2. Then there's a third set of proposals which are about the workload standard and eliminating efficiencies in the considerations. I call that proposals 3. And the last one is proposals 4. And so what I'll do is I'll reread each of the proposals to make sure that we know which one we're talking about if we start using a reference number afterwards. Does that work for everyone? Okay, and let me just make sure, does everyone have a copy of the proposals? I'm sure the staff representatives do. Does everyone from the working group also have access to a copy? Okay, good. I see everyone says that they have access to a copy as well. Okay, so for the first set of proposals, the first set of proposals starts with 6 considerations, and then it's followed by 3 proposals. And the considerations talk about the GA saying, the first considering said the GA resolution contains no clear mandate and instructions. So the General Assembly resolution actually mentions the translation services and not translation specifically per se. Azucena is going to send you a list of reference materials that we took into account and that provide additional background as to why we took into account self-revision. So what I would suggest we do, if you agree, since we sent this material just very shortly before the meeting, I suggest that we talk about this on our meeting on Thursday so that you as staff representatives have time to read all of the material that Azucena said. Would that be okay with everyone? I see Karina nodding yes. Doris, what are your thoughts? Works as well, Sharif?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. That's good. So those proposals we will leave to set them aside for now, which are proposals Roman numeral 1, and then we will go ahead and go down. So for proposals number 2, One of the things that's challenging to be a chair of a working group of 4 different duty stations when I've only worked in one of these duty stations, and I joined the DGACM as a manager. So this means that although I have a language competitive examination, I've never gone through the process that you have. So I would like to understand a little bit more about the proposal that comes under Roman numeral 2, which is a fair credit be given to all staff performing additional tasks by either considering an X factor or allowing staff members to get credit for any tasks that fall outside their main duties. And the reason I say this is because here in Geneva, we have some support staff. We have a referencing on demand team. Anything that can be automated, identified automatically within Iluna is done so. We have terminologists and terminology assistants, and we have a small administrative assistant team. And in Geneva, we've done a lot of, we've actually spent a lot of training funds and given training time to learn how to do web design for what they're interested in. And so for us, we have training days that are given to staff. And then with respect to some of the number of special assignments, in Geneva, we monitor special assignments, but some of our staff do have special assignments, usually because they are requested to take on special assignments because they're asked to do something extra. Otherwise, you have what is part of main duties. And perhaps there is a gap between what some managers consider the main duties of a translator, the main duties of a reviser, and the way staff perceive them in terms of the special assignments that they should get. So one of the things that we've recommended is that we've recommended that a working group be set up to review special assignments. And in terms of managing expectations, let me say right away that special assignments will probably be handled differently in different duty stations because of the business need of the duty station, because of the workload of the duty station, and because of the staffing level of the duty station. For example, in Vienna, it's my understanding that the chief is also working as the programming officer. So obviously this doesn't have an effect on the special assignments. And some sections, it is a P4 who will be programming officer, and they're will be deducted from the production time. So in terms of managing expectations, we can gain a better understanding of them, but I'm not really sure I understand what exactly you are hoping for with this particular request. So over to you, colleagues. Karina?
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, I believe that I have received quite a few emails from New York staff, and we all know that over the past years, the number of special assignments has gone down. And while some special assignments are still given, staff feel that it's not nearly enough to cover all the activities that they do outside the translation work per se, which also includes terminology, some administrative tasks, the feedback sessions that revisers are supposed to have with translators. So basically anything that goes into the workload but is not accounted for. And I know previously there used to be some proposals as to the X factor, and as far as I understand, it wasn't considered to be the most efficient way of calculating that extra time that staff spend on other tasks, just because some staff by default spend more time on some areas because they are probably more qualified to do some type of work. In New York, for example, some staff are in charge of maintaining the multiple platforms that we have that only multiplied during the COVID situation when everyone had to telecommute. So as far as I understand, X factor was considered at some point and was discarded as not the most efficient or fair way of accounting those tasks. So I'm just curious what can be done to account for those activities that are not accounted for right now. And I don't know if this is also the case for other duty stations, but in New York, I have definitely received a lot of those messages.
Thank you, Karina. Thank you, Karina, for clarifying. And let me go ahead and hand over to Cecilia to address to address those concerns. And then other duty stations can add something if they would wish to do so. Cecilia?
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, when I started working as a translator in New York, we used to call the special assignments, we used to call them X factor, which is time that we are giving colleagues to do other tasks. Okay, and this time is deducted from the productive time that you are spending in productivity. So it has an impact on the individual productivity. The more special assignments you have, then your individual productivity looks better because you have less, you do more pages in less time. The X factor or the special assignment is exactly the same. Doesn't count towards the throughput productivity that we report to member states, because in the formula it is just the we calculate how productive our services were during the time that they were working on translation. So we have in the special assignments two types of special assignments. What we call mandated activities, for instance, quality control, for instance, the examinations, marking the exams, preparing the exams, interviewing people. Then we have everything else. And in everything else, there are a few things, like training, that in all the services we have, a number of hours that are dedicated to training, either individual or global, general group training. And we also have other special assignments for different things, like the miscellaneous, the going into projects, doing some other special things that the chief or the programming officer asked to do, and very, very little the terminology, for instance. And we have very little special assignments that are authorized, for instance, for research, or although sometimes we may have. So my point here, Karina, is that in the past years, the situation of the special assignments in the different services was very uneven. So we had services with a 6% of special assignments and services to 25% of special assignments. So, there were like the practices and all the services doing more or less the same. The practices was, that in some services, colleagues identified and even they were encouraged by former managers to record the special assignments to be fast productivity. So this is something that now, for comparability, we cannot really have one service, two services doing exactly the same, and in one service, having 15, 20, 25% of special assignments and another service 6%. So we are working on actually bringing, the same understanding in all the translation services in New York for comparability, but also because the time that you are not, even if it doesn't go into the individual productivity, even if it doesn't go to the service productivity levels, it has a cost. So if you are given a lot of special assignments, somebody else needs to be doing the work that you are not producing. So I think that one interesting idea that come up through this working group is like to review again the special assignments. We have colleagues, for instance, who think that we should have special assignments to fill the education grant claim. We have colleagues who think that we need to have special assignments to go, to do the U.S. taxes. But, those special assignments, I think personally that these are related to the individual, and everything that is related to our own benefits You know, all the organization needs to do that. I mean, and you have a deadline to produce a report. You cannot tell your boss, no, I cannot produce my report because I need to fill the education grant of my children. So I believe that in the follow-up of the working group, we are going to have a very common understanding across all duty stations, across all the services, about what is reasonable to expect from the special assignments. And maybe we can also come up with some kind of conversions, you know, to pages for special assignments like quality control, you know, instead of crediting against the time. But also to show member states, because these are not really pages that we are producing, because it's work on top of the work, on top of the production, it's quality control. But it may be good, I mean, and a lot of colleagues have told me that they would like to see those converted into pages, because this is, you know, a way of showing your contribution to the service. So that was a long explanation, but I think, you know, it's a matter that we need to discuss, and that we need to discuss it also from the perspective of equal treatment of everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia, and thank you, Karina. Indeed, this is something that that has come in to account also for the English translation service, where colleagues who are involved in Prezi writing have talked about whether or not Prezi writing should be measured and converted to pages. Let me clarify that it's my understanding that special assignments do have an impact on throughput, as it reduces the number of days that are available for translation. So I just wanted to clarify that point. Karina, did you have any further questions, or did you want to follow up on what's something that Cecilia had said?
Yes, just a brief comment. Thank you, Cecilia, for the explanation. And you know, we've been having these information sessions for quite a while, and I know that some services have also organized terminology trainings and trainings that were supposed to help staff with new quality evaluation sheets. And as far as I know, those hours have not been credited yet. So I think what we also need, you mentioned the equal treatment among services, and I think we just all need some kind of common understanding as to what can be discounted, so that staff don't reach out to you know, chiefs or programming officers or me all the time asking whether this is discounted, this is not, and then it's a whole trail of emails. 5 people are trying to respond why it's discounted or not. So I think we just don't have that common standard. If staff understood that for every mandatory training session, whatever that is, they get those hours discounted, I think that would already give them peace of mind.
Yeah, I think this is what we are aiming to achieve. But I would be like very, very suspicious about this information that the meetings for the translation quality evaluation were not credited as a special assignment. And Rima, maybe she can say something. Maybe she knows more about this. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Cecilia. I am not aware of any service who did not credit the training for the new evaluation sheet and, you know, the instructions to revisors as special assignments. You may have some information about a credit that was not recorded yet, but I mean, I am not aware. Already it takes a lot of time from everybody's production time. I don't see any chief saying, no, we're not going to credit this as special assignments. I mean, so please, I mean, you know, if you have any information, please, you know, inform Cecilia, but I don't, honestly, I don't think, you know, there is any service who are not going to credit this.
Thank you, Rima. Doris?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. I see that it's an issue that when you have so different percentages of special assignments among sections or services of the same duty station, but it's very hard to compare the larger duty stations with the smaller ones. Like in Vienna, we only have one P5 who is the training officer and the terminologist. We don't have another staff member who's specifically taking care of terminology and training. So the P4s have to share those responsibilities with a senior revisor, especially because we have such technical fields that it's impossible for the senior revisor to cover and master all the technical fields. So she relies on the different experts on each topic to help with proposing UN term entries and correcting, updating them. So I understand that, of course, terminology research is part of our work when we do it for our own document. But when we are feeding UN term and working on UN term for the benefit of everybody, that is like a separate task that should be credited as a special assignment. And when we are being, curtailed, the time that we can spend on that, it affects, of course, our productivity. Also, the senior revisor asks for our support to train junior translators and external junior translator on the specific technical fields. So she's also, counting on us for that. And she is the only one who takes has a percentage of her time devoted to those tasks, which in fact she's sharing with the P4s. So it's very difficult, to establish comparisons among duty stations. And I think it's great if each duty station can have like a different or flexibility to manage special assignments. Thank you.
Thank you, Doris. I think that the purpose of the working group is to come up with a shared understanding of what is happening in other duty stations. And I don't think anybody wants to impose any type of heavy bureaucratic compliance mandatory situation. I agree with you that based on the needs of a specific duty stations, there may be a room to have some variation. What will come into consideration, Doris, is the cost, I'm sure. For example, in Geneva, we choose to have terminologists at the P3 level. In Geneva, even though we're the second largest duty station, we don't have training officers full time. We only have training officers when we have new P3s coming along. And so I think that the purpose of the focus group is really to have a better understanding of the exchanges of practices. Since you've worked in many duty stations, Doris, you know how things have evolved. And I think it's important that people are comfortable understanding that when we say one thing for a very large duty station, then we just need to take it into account in the other duty stations as well to see where this is a good practice, we want to learn from it, or this is a practice that wouldn't work or that isn't feasible in our particular duty station. If you think about programming officers, for example, I was having a conversation with a colleague this morning to say, if we look at how much work is involved as a programming officer, how many documents are coming, what is the word count, that kind of gives us an indication, should somebody work as a programming officer full-time? Does it represent 50% of their time, 25% of their time? Or if it's just 1 or 2 documents a day and it's just something that they do as part of their workload? And is there a need to take a half-day special assignment just because we say that somebody is a programming officer part-time? I think that those are conversations that need to take place, maybe on a performance management level, but also on a wider level to have a larger understanding across the duty stations of what is comparable and what isn't. Did I answer? Would our colleagues for staff representatives like to say anything else about this, about proposals number 2, which was a fair credit be given to all staff members performing these additional tasks, and the response that we as management have, as working group, have come up with to both the considerations and the proposals. Laura?
Yes. I just wanted to say that I also have heard this said by staff and from different duty stations. So there is a perception that staff are not allowed to take time to spend, and particularly on terminology work that can benefit, the entire section or service. And that it seemed, people feel, I think, that they would be punished for doing something that could, in fact, raise everybody's productivity in the future, and that if that approach is being taken in various places, that might be rather short-sighted. Thank you.
Laura, thank you for that. I think that part of it has to do, especially when it comes to terminology, that the department is shifting in the way it is doing terminology. Whereas in the past, terminology, there's a lot of terminology that was proactive to enrich the terminology database. What we've ended up with is actually quite a bit of terminology that nobody is using and that isn't coming up in Iluna and is creating noise. So what has happened is that the department has shifted its policy from a terminology perspective to a user-driven terminology system, where what the way terminology is driven is by requests made by users, more specifically, as opposed to knowledge management upfront, where we take documents and we look for terminology without being sure that people are going to need them. I think that there's a balance that needs to be taken place. I think that in areas that are going through rapid changes from a terminology perspective, perhaps there is some room for this. I know that this is something that my colleagues tell me, and I'm sure that as time goes, we will be able to access more and more data that will help drive the decisions for terminology in terms of usefulness of terminology. But thank you for raising this. I do know that I remember when I was a translator that sometimes if you don't have a deadline, you want to spend more time doing research. And one of the reasons why there's been this cap on special assignments is because managers have to intervene and say, we've reached the point where enough research has been done and we cannot continue to go ahead and do continue in this vein. Let me give the floor over to Xiaoxin. I see who's asked for the floor. Your microphone, Xiaoxin.
Xiaoxin, go ahead.
I think Xiaoxin maybe is experiencing some technical difficulties, so maybe he can, if he puts something in the chat, I can see what is happening. Otherwise, in the meantime, does anyone else have anything to say about this proposal, which was proposal Roman numeral 2? Go ahead, Xiaoxin, your microphone is on. Oh, you just turned it off. Xiaoxin, your microphone is on. Go ahead. We definitely can't hear you. So I'm going to let you to deal with that for a moment, and I'll go ahead and move on to the next set of proposals.
Xiaoxin, sometimes it helps, like if you leave and come back very quickly, then it kind of resets.
Okay, if I take a look at proposals number 3. So proposals number 3 is the one that has to do with working methods. And so what our colleagues are proposing, they're saying that priority needs to be given to find ways to improve our working methods as a whole, such as eliminating inefficiencies, finding themselves in a situation where they don't have any work, staff being confident that all aspects of their performance will be taken into account, solving other issues, reviewing revision practices, and organizing a survey of Iluna. I must admit that I was quite shocked to hear that some colleagues were in a situation where they may not have a job assigned for them for an extended period of time, and that they should be credited because from a managerial perspective, this is something that I would not like to see certainly happening within Geneva. I know that our staff have, you know, kind of like as a default position, if they have no work, they can check their mandatory training, and if they have no mandatory training, then there's work that can be done on terminology in some cases, and in the third case, there's also training that can be done, additional training that can be done in LinkedIn. So it's not something that that we would see to the best of my knowledge. But what I can say is that in GDOC 2.0, we are hoping to have a mechanism in place that would allow us to address this in a much stronger way, and it would help us to go ahead and do that. So that's what I wanted. That was just my first comment about the first sorry, about that was my first comment about the proposal that was made here when we were considering the service level productivity. I see that several colleagues have asked for the floor, so let me give the floor first over to Cecilia, then to Laura.
Thank you, Michelle. I would like to know more about this. I don't know if this is coming from New York. I don't think so. The only time that we have little work, it was in the Chinese service last year, and we brought work from Geneva. Then we did a lot of projects and training. So I'm not sure if this is coming from New York. I would like to know more. One of the things that as a former translator I used always to do is that before finishing my current job, you know, like my current translation, and I was reading it again, I would already ask the programming officer for the next assignment, so I don't have a gap, you know, so I can manage my time. Then if I want to do something else, it's not that I'm just waiting for the programming officer. But I would like to know more about this because I was not aware if it is from New York. Thank you.
Laura, then Doris.
Yeah, I believe that it does happen in New York from the comments that I saw in the information session and from what I've heard. But yeah, I don't think staff aren't talking about when there isn't any work, but about when staff members are left without a job. There isn't really any reason that happening, but it does happen, and many colleagues raised that.
Well, I think it's an interesting point,
well, in
Laura.
the English service,
No,
maybe.
No. I don't know.
It doesn't really happen. You know, we have a throughput productivity of 7 pages, so it's not that we are, you know, very not busy. On the contrary, yeah. Maybe
it's not about being
busy.
busy. Sorry. It's about, it doesn't matter how busy the service is if a translator doesn't have a job assigned to them. And staff say that does happen.
Well, I think that if staff are saying that it happens, that they are waiting for a job, it's something that we can certainly take into account. And I will certainly discuss everything that we discuss in the working group with my chiefs of section. And I will certainly discuss with my chiefs to ask them if they think it's happened. And certainly when it comes to mitigation measures, if it's possible to assign a second job, it certainly should be the case. But with respect to the first two proposals with the priority, let's first say that we agree that the work should be efficient, that we want ways for the work to be efficient, and we will definitely share with our chiefs. I see that Maite has asked for the floor, and then Karina.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, thanks. I haven't recently, I mean, my own experience, like in Nairobi, is that recently I haven't been without a job, but also we are way more flexible than any other duty station because we're so small. So it's not like we have really a programming officer or training officer. We don't have that because some sections, so some units have only one person. So, you know, you don't wait in those cases. You know what you have to do. But I do remember my experience in New York, and although my colleagues were fantastic, so I'm absolutely not blaming anybody or anything, but it does happen that it's not for prolonged periods of time, but if you don't have a document for 1 hour, it counts, especially if you're raising the workload standard. 1 hour of work is a lot in our day. So it's just that we can't wait even that hour. Most of us in New York, we used to not take lunch breaks, stay longer hours to be able to do the job. So, I mean, when I say an hour, I would say even every minute counts. So that's one thing. Work sharing, yes, work sharing is there, and we've done it, for example, in Nairobi. But actually, it takes time from the moment you request work to the moment you actually receive it. It's very long. And for a duty station like Nairobi, for example, it's very difficult because we're so small. I'm telling you, 1 in Russian, 2 in Spanish, etc. If you wait too long, we can do in-house very few pages a day. So if we don't have work and we ask for it and it comes a week later, it might be too late because some clients might have sent already, you know, a big document, a big publication, and then we don't have time to do it. But we've done it quite a lot. I think last year we received more than I think we've not given anything to anyone, but we've received a lot. I mean, a lot for us. But it's not super efficient. And to comment on that same point, I was a little bit concerned at the last meeting that, and also by all those you know, workload standard changes and stuff that somehow not blame, because I mean everybody apparently recognizes that translators work a lot and go above and beyond. But I was a bit concerned that, you know, blame is put on translators and we add more work to translators, and we're not looking at the fact that, well, maybe if we had, I don't know, better support services, and I don't want to blame anyone, so I'm not going to say too much on the topic, but maybe we also have an issue in support services, and that's an obstacle for us to produce more, or at least to produce better. So I think that's also what this proposal was about, that we start looking at something else than numbers, our numbers, and we can start at looking at other services as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Maite. Before I give the floor over to colleagues, as I said, I would certainly welcome any discussions about improving efficiency and in Geneva, where we have indeed some support services. It's one of the things that we've been talking about, which is measuring satisfaction and client satisfaction with our support services, the ones that are within our zone of influence and zone of control. And of course, we have to take into account the cost of the support services. And there is a general trend to see what can be automated and what can be automated efficiently and effectively. I see your comment in the chat, Maite, a little bit further up about Umoja sometimes being slow, and that there are some activities that used to be done by human resources, which are now done by staff members. And this is one of the big changes that has happened, is certainly within Geneva, is that our staff who used to have admin positions and were able to do staff on behalf of staff, they were not given any user rights to do so when we transitioned to Umoja. And this is a big change that not everyone is necessarily aware of, which is that if our staff do not have the access rights to your records, there's absolutely nothing that they can do, there's absolutely nothing that they can do on your behalf. So let me give the floor over to Karina and see if anyone else had asked for the floor.
Thank you, Michelle. I have received messages mostly from the Chinese translation service, and I think that was mostly the situation over the past year, because as we know, this is the only service that is overstaffed, at least in New York, and a few people messaged me saying that they are really afraid of this increase in productivity because they couldn't even manage the productivity that we had, and now with the increase, they're afraid that they will not have enough work, so their productivity will eventually go down, and they're not sure that the work sharing mechanism will help. The English service has that issue as well, but as far as I understand, we are all on the same page. Their nature of work is very different, so I'm not sure it's applied to them as to the other services. But as to the other services, I know that a few years ago, we used to have those downtime periods, mostly before the session of the General Assembly would start. And quite a few people in my service as well would have several days of not having any work assigned to them because we just didn't have enough. And I don't think it was the case last year. If anything, we were overwhelmed with work, but before that would definitely happen. And that's when I would receive a lot of emails from staff saying that it's not necessarily their problem that there's no work, but it's them who are being punished because their productivity goes down. And I don't think that we were allowed to take any trainings outside the mandatory trainings back then. So, you know, if you've already completed all the trainings in Inspira, there's not much you can do. Some people did a terminology work, but again, how many hours of terminology work can you do a day? 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, like that's not possible. So I think that was mostly an issue a few years ago. Thank you.
Let me give the floor. I see Rima and then Cecilia.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so just, you know, to clarify about the workflow in New York. First of all, I would like to correct the sentence overstaffed. The Chinese service is not overstaffed. The Chinese service is fully staffed. It so happens that, you know, other services are not fully staffed, but the Chinese service has the staff that it has in the staffing table. So, and it's not their fault. That's the way it is. Other services have vacancies. The Chinese do not have vacancies. So that's the start point. Second, just to comment on the fact that staff wait and they are waiting for the programming officer to assign work. The programming officer assign work, yes. The programming officer has a number of staff, 40, 50, 60, you know, to assign work to. He or she may overlook one or two, you know, requests for, not requests, notifications that the staff finished. But it is also, if I may, the staff responsibility to ask for work if they do not have work. I don't know why a staff member who does not have work sit and wait for somebody else, you know, to just realize they don't have work. So this is something. There are mechanisms in all services, at least in New York, for not only the programming officer to pay attention, but for the staff also, you know, to indicate to the programming officer that they need work. And this, I think all services, you know, have now put this mechanism in place. Regarding the workload that Karina mentioned a few years back, the problem is that we have a huge workload. Before the General Assembly, Karina, I'm not sure. Before the General Assembly, everybody is overwhelmed. We have people on leave. We have a lot of work to deliver. So maybe the period that you are mentioning, actually, it is within 1 month of the GA when we start receiving, you know, all the draft resolutions. And in that case, we don't have enough work for translators under revision sometimes, but we are overwhelmed, you know, with all kinds of other work for self-revisors. Usually the services, again, they have mechanisms for that, and they request workload sharing, or they ask people, to do training. I do not know about the Russian service, but I think all services also have mechanisms to allow staff to do training, even if it's not mandatory training. You do not want anybody to sit idle without any work, because first of all, it's not fair. And second, if this happens, we need to record this as special assignment. And it might happen from time to time. But the workload is so big, I don't think, really there is so much room for this. The efficiency, absolutely, we need to be very efficient, because the way we are working right now and the challenges that we are going to have, and we are having already, dictate that, we need to continue reviewing our working methods and, to achieve, the highest efficiency possible. But the highest efficiency possible is not only the responsibility of the managers or the programming officers, it is also the responsibility of staff. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rima. Cecilia?
Yeah, so just to complement about this issue, to be honest, I think that maybe this is individual cases. I don't even remember as a translator and achieved to have even half a day without translation in New York. Maybe, as Rima said, maybe we don't have work for translators under revision, but I remember in those particular cases when we have the resolutions, we encourage people to record and do all kind of training. So Karina, what I would like to know is if this is an individual service or if individual colleagues. For the work sharing, I agree with Maite that it takes a lot of time, and this is why in GDOC 2 we are embedding mechanisms so to compare the capacity and the workload for each duty station so that we can share work. I mean, we shouldn't have people waiting for work. So it's I'm really, really, really surprised about this, and I would like to know more, because this is clearly something that we don't want to do, Karina. Thank you.
Well, there seems to be unanimity that we don't want this to happen, and that it's something that we want to review and to address. I see that Sharif and Doris have asked for the floor.
Can I talk? Or Doris?
Go ahead.
Can talk first? No, I have no problem. My plan for today was to display some fresh stuff, perspectives which I collected and distilled from the feedback I received from colleagues in my unit. But I don't know how to fit this into Michelle's agenda. Can I just say them? They have to do with the
Hold on,
third.
no. Excuse me, Sharif. No, I don't want to interrupt the middle of the proposals that we're reviewing, because otherwise we won't finish. What I suggest you do is that send them to us, and we can talk about them on Thursday, because then we can read them and prepare. Because what we have is that we still have a little bit of time left in front of us, and if we're done with this point about efficiency, I'd really like to move to the next set of proposals.
Okay.
So send it to us, and we can talk. We'll put it up first one next time. Okay.
No problem. No problem.
Thank you, Doris.
Yes, thank you. On a personal note, I can't remember one single day that I was either out of work or no work available in Vienna. We seem to be always, overwhelmed with work. And also, I've worked as a programming officer in Vienna, and it would really be great if the work sharing arrangement could be more efficient and flexible, because it takes a lot of time, a lot of bureaucracy involved. And also there's a problem that you have to wait for the other programming officer in the other duty station to let you know whether they have people available to accept the job. And sometimes they don't want to accept it because it's too technical and they're not prepared for it. So it would be great if ways could be found to really expedite and make it more efficient, because at this point it's not really helping very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Doris. I think that we would all welcome more efficiency from a workload sharing perspective, not only from a production perspective, but also, as you point out, specializations. When duty stations have certain very technical areas, the documents need to be assigned for persons with specializations. And I know that something that is a recurring request from our colleagues here in Geneva is the ability to translate from languages other than English, especially in Arabic and into Arabic and into Chinese. It's an area that we are interested in exploring further because it's an area where we don't have enough capacity. So thank you for the input of Vienna. So can we say now that the proposals that I had called proposals number 3 have basically been we've reviewed and we've discussed? Maite, I see you have your hand up, and Karina.
Thank you, Michelle. I just want to respond to Rima's comment on the fact that translators should not sit on their hands. It is not my experience. My experience is that they do ask for jobs, but programming officers are human beings like anybody else, and sometimes they get overwhelmed, and it's normal, and we're not blaming them. It's just to explain, and that's what I was saying before, that an hour counts, and that if you're asked, if we are asked, requested to produce more, we all need to understand just that an hour counts. So it was my experience in New York, and programming officers are my friends, and I deeply respect their work. But it did happen that I didn't have a job right away, even when I requested before I finished the document that I had. It doesn't happen every day. It doesn't, but it does happen. That's all that we're saying. The second thing is to say that staff are the ones who can do something, etc. Okay, yes, of course we can do our part, but staff have no authority on other services, and we cannot make decisions, and we cannot implement any decisions. We can just do our job. So I think we're doing it and quite well, and we produce quite a lot as well. So just that. And so that's why I said that efficiency should also be sought in other services, that it is not only translators. Thank you.
Thank you, Maite. Thank you, Maite.
May I ask a clarification question? Because Michelle, about to Maite, when you mean other services, you mean like DMS? But what do you mean, Maite?
Yeah, but that's you know, it's not easy to, I don't want to, that's the thing, I don't want to blame anyone. But I mean, we all know who's before us, you know, and I'm talking docs control, I'm talking contractual, I'm talking everybody around us, and they don't necessarily make our job easier, sorry to say. So yeah, that, I mean, and there may be other services that I'm not mentioning now, but yeah, and like, for example, I was very surprised during the global roster cleanup. I was surprised that we had to go into CMA and check that the translators, for example, we had many translators translating into Spanish on the French roster. Why are they here, and why is it us having to go through the roster and not contractual unit? You know, to do the at least the basic cleanup, and then after that we can have a look at the translators and say yes, this one no, because we know their work. But if it's cleaning up a contractor's roster, I would think that at least the first step is for contractual unit, or maybe I missed a step, and you know, maybe I was not involved from the beginning, and I misunderstood. But you know, things like that, I didn't really see why it was upon us and not upon contractual unit.
Thank you. Thank you for your input, Maite. I think that I can say that as senior managers, we do not agree with efficient. We want to have efficient systems that work effectively, and I also think that if you're participating in a process as to, you know, and you're asking a question, well, why is it that we are being asked to do something as opposed to something else? There's certainly something that I would welcome if someone in my service if any of my staff who are working on the GLR has said, well, why are we cleaning it up as opposed to the contractual work unit? I think that one of the reasons that this may have happened has to do with the size of the different duty stations and the technical expertise, and also with the fact that there no longer is a contractual work unit in New York. So that means that when the GLR was conceived, the GLR review process was conceived, it was conceived with the chiefs of service in New York spearheading the process, interacting directly with each of the sections and units in the duty stations, and there was not much of a role envisaged for the contractual work units. In Geneva, what we did during the GLR process is that our colleagues in the contractual work unit offered support to the sections that wished to do so, including supporting them with the cleanup if they wished. In many cases, the chiefs of section actually thought that this was a good opportunity for them to review the roster and all of the rosters, and so it had a dual role for them, Maite, if you wish. There was both the aspect of cleaning up, but also an opportunity to kind of take a good look at the people that we have in our rosters, because it's on the basis of the cleanup exercise that we'll be able to decide why are we going to start advertising new are we going to start advertising and looking for new contractors? So if you were working in Geneva and you had asked me, well, why am I doing this as opposed to contractual? That's probably what I would have told you. Let me give the floor to, I think Azucena had asked for the floor, then Karina. And I apologize if I'm not keeping everyone in order right, but there's no ranking as to who last spoke in the system. So if someone wants to yield to someone else because of an order, do feel free. But I think Azucena had asked for the floor for quite some time.
Thank you, Michelle. Actually, I wanted to reassure Maite, we're not blaming anyone. I think if we are looking at efficiencies, then we have to look at the overall, documentation chain. Of course, our working group does not have control on certain factors, so I can understand that maybe we don't have much control about what's going on at documents management unit or maybe after, contractual unit. But I think, I don't know what the working group thinks, but these factors, we could still take them into consideration and take a look at them. In fact, I wanted to hear more about what you called support services, because from your perspective, you might also want to give us more input about what you understand about the quality of support services, what could be changed or improved. Maybe we could take a look at that. And that's one point. The other question to answer Michelle's, because Michelle, you asked her whether we had finished considering all the proposals under number 3. I think there's an item that, at least for me, caught my attention is performance management. And I from the proposal raised by staff representatives, I see that there seems to be an issue with performance management, whether people have the feeling we don't take into account all the criteria to assess the performance, whether this performance management can involve special negotiations. So I wanted to hear more about that, because for me it's an area of concern. We are first reporting officers, chiefs, at least in Vienna. I know that in other services, duty stations, P5s might have this role, but it's important. It's an important question. Because we have one thing is the workload standards and the general rules applicable to our work, but then we have this performance management at individual level, and this is a very specific procedure that is very specific because it's a discussion between the FRO and the staff member, and so I wanted to hear more about that, because I think it's an area, I don't know if we have much control about it, but it's important for us to hear about it and have more information, more input from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Azucena. Ooh, I think that the timing actually, in terms of having better further conversations about performance management, is excellent. As many of you know, colleagues, this year for the next performance appraisal cycle, there's going to be a new performance management system that is going to be rolled out. That is indeed going to require staff members to include behaviors as part of their goals. And it's my understanding that all of the information and the launch is going to take place on the 22nd of March. And this is a change that is going to take place gradually. And I think that this will indeed be an opportunity to have conversations about performance management, because as Hussein, as you point out, and as Maite said, I mean, certainly when it comes to Geneva, translators and revisers have more than one indicator. Productivity is only one of the areas in our work plan. We also have quality, timeliness, and additional tasks as well. And perhaps this should be an opportunity to have further conversations for staff to understand what is the most important criteria. I know that if someone were to have the conversation with me, I always say that it's never productivity alone. It's always productivity balanced with quality and balanced with timeliness. And those are the three factors that need to be taken into account, and also with cost efficiency. And this is something that needs to be taken into account. Let me give the floor over to Karina, Laura, and Doris, I believe.
Thank you, Michelle. Just to clarify that by overstaffed, I meant that the Chinese service had more people than work. It's a fact, at least for the past year, and I have multiple emails confirming that. So it's just a brief explanation of what I meant. And as to the individual cases that Cecilia asked about, yes, those are individual cases always. Not 60 people, reach out to me saying that they don't have work, but it's still quite a large proportion. And I remember back in 2019, mostly translators, not as much staff revisers, would reach out to me asking what they are supposed to do. If there's no work, they would actually come to the office by 7 or 8 a.m. to put their name on the list on the programming office's door so that they would be given work on first come, first served basis, but still there wasn't enough. So that's mostly what I was referring to. And last year, the situation was completely different because of the pandemic, the liquidity crisis, and all those other factors. So yeah, I'm not going to even touch that. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, Karina. Let me give the floor over to Doris and then to Laura.
Yes. Well, the performance management is really very important. And it's important to know that productivity is just one of the factors that is taken into account. Because I was quite worried to hear Rima said in last meeting that those translators or self-revisers who produced less than 5 pages a day were always considered underperformers. And maybe I understood you wrong. Maybe it was okay. I apologize if I understood incorrectly. Because throughout my long career, I could always see that those who made it to P4s or P5s were people, most of them, that were appreciated for the quality of their work and what they contributed to the organization. So the number of pages that they were producing were just a factor that was taken into account and not the main issue. So that's what I'm worried about.
Michelle, may I respond, please?
Sure.
What I said was not that self-revisers who do less than 5 pages are considered underperformers. I said that in general, and this is my personal experience, people who do less work, they do not necessarily do the best quality. And actually, people who do less productivity most of the time, they do less quality because they have, in quite a few cases, time management issues. So this is what I said. And I didn't mention self-revisers. I didn't mention translators. I said that in general, people who were considered, as underperformer, they do not have the problem with the quantity only, they have problems with quality. And the balance is what we are looking for.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rima. Laura?
Yes. So I was going to come back slightly to the problem of people being left without jobs, and the fact that it's that translators should be asking for more work. I would say that that's the way it works at the UN. It's not the only way to organize a system. The last place I worked in a team about as large as my section, I don't think anyone ever asked for another job, because the person whose job it was to give out the work just kept it coming. So I'm not saying let's do everything the way that they used to where I used to work. I'm just saying that perhaps, and maybe this new GDOC system would be, there might be ways to look at the overall workflow processes and find some improvements. On the performance management, I think where that recommendation came from was that many staff members were saying, well, we're talking about doing technical documents, new languages, more challenging tasks. And then the answer given to the staff members who raised those concerns was, well, you can always ask your chief and say, I'm going to take more time to do this. And so the staff should already be confident that it will be recognized that they're taking on these more difficult tasks, that they're learning new things, that they're always willing to volunteer to do something else, and it shouldn't have to be the subject of special negotiations, because that's just a waste of everyone's time. And I don't think that staff are confident that all aspects of their performance are taken into account equally.
Laura, let me respond to that one, because the question of special assignments has been a long discussion, and I can speak confidently with respect to what happens in Geneva. Some of the challenges that have arisen in Geneva in the past is that staff have said, I would like to learn this language. And then they say they're given time off over the years. And then 2 years down the line, they say, I don't want to translate in that language anymore. We've also had different cases of staff who've said they want to learn a language that the organization doesn't particularly need. So they want to learn the language because they believe in multilingualism. They hear about this being a core value. And what we tell staff is that, yes, you can learn a language, but you're not necessarily going to get special assignments if you want to learn a language that isn't a language that we need from a business perspective. One of the things that we have to be that we manage that we have to deal with as managers when it comes to special assignments is the cost of what this investment is, and what the possible return on investment is going to be. And I agree with you about that there are some colleagues that we will need to proactively go about and say, yes, you're doing something we've asked you to do. Yes, you can have special assignments. You may not be able to have 50 hours of special assignments, but yes, 5 hours is fair. But what we've had in Geneva on certain occasions is colleagues who do something that can be the equivalent of 10, 12 working hours, and then they come and claim special assignment to the chief without having asked for permission, and without and asking for an adjustment to the work that they do, not because the chief has asked them to do something, but because this is something that has been driven from them, that they want to do something. And this is for sure, it's a conversation that needs to take place. And what I'm hearing from you is that you believe that some staff are not receiving credit for things that they're being asked to do, and that's not what I'm saying. I see you looking puzzled at me.
Sorry,
And
I'm sorry.
Hold on, Laura. First of all, I see you looking puzzled, and so I'm going to go back and ask you to reconfirm what I've said, because if I'm misunderstanding you, I'm glad that we both have our camera on and we can have this nonverbal communication.
Sorry, I wasn't actually talking about special assignments particularly. I was more talking about things that might lower someone's productivity. So, for example, say that the staff members already learned a new language because that was necessary, and people are saying, so I can translate from English, but I can't translate from this language fast enough and what I was saying is that I don't think there necessarily should be a need to say, can I have special assignments? It should just be understood that some of the jobs you do will be lowering your average productivity, and that was more what I was talking about.
Okay, so then let me say that when it comes to people learning additional languages, this is mainly a Geneva issue because it's only in Geneva that approximately 20% of our documents come in languages other than English. And so it was felt that there was no need to create a recommendation for the whole department for things that are only going to affect staff, that are mainly going to affect staff in Geneva. But the conversation that you're putting about, the chiefs in Geneva have put forward some ideas as to what can be done. And I have asked them if they want me to include this in an SOP that we could then share with staff that would indeed accommodate this request or this expectation that you have, Laura, which is that yes, if you've learned a new language, you are going to be slower. And what is a reasonable amount of time, extra time that you could be given? Now, with respect to technical documents, I think that any colleague who has translated a technical document, the first time they tackle a technical document in a new area, their productivity is not going to be as high as it will be for a document that they've been a type of document that they've been translating for 5 or more years. When, especially in Geneva, when we talk about some of our flagship publications in innovative and new areas where there is zero reprise, where there are publications that cannot even go into Iluna because of the formatting that we have. This is something that we will discuss in the evaluation on authoring. And this is one of the areas that we want to look into, is this question of evaluation of authoring. And when we're dealing with technical documents, how can there be a common understanding? Because on the one hand, I have chiefs who tell me, Michelle, it's normal that someone only translates 3 or 4 pages when they're working on the International Law Commission the first few years, or when they're working on, trade and development or economics or something with road transportation. And then on the other hand, we have colleagues as translators who tell me my productivity is low. Why doesn't my chief accept it? So I think that this is something that I need to work on with my chiefs to make sure that there's a common understanding with this. Because when you ask any chief, they say, if someone's starting to work on a technical area, there needs to be some accommodation. Cecilia?
Yes, I just wanted to comment on Maite put a comment there about if other people need to ask for permission to do something, to learn, and of course, Maite, the language sessions at the UN, you can do them at your own page in your own time during lunchtime. But if you are going to do something officially, that then you are going to be requested, it is different. I mean, I cannot even say to my own boss, I'm going to learn Russian, which is a language that I want to learn. And so then from this hour to this hour, I'm not going to be available. I'm not going to work. Don't expect me. I mean, it doesn't work this way for anybody. What I'm trying to what I'm listening today is that colleagues seem to have issues with, not with policy decisions, but it's more like in the communication with their own chief and the programming officers, which is not, the administration. So this is the performance management, for instance. From the policy perspective, is very clear. And all the chiefs, when I discuss with them, there is not even one single chief that says the only criteria is productivity. Of course not. I mean, nobody says that. You can have like a beautiful productivity if quality is very bad. You're going to have a note there saying quality is still not good. Maybe slow down with the productivity and focus on your quality. You need to do a time management session. So colleagues, I think you know that we are discussing mainly why we are not getting, enough communication in the translation services. Because all these issues is not at the policy. We all agree we need to be more efficient. Nobody is saying, no, let's be inefficient. But why we don't have these conversations internally in the teams with the chief? This is why I think that we need to put the focus on. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. So can I go ahead and say that this particular point is finished? The proposals under proposals Roman numeral 3. I see no hands raised. So let me move on to proposals number 4. So proposal number 4 was that accrediting policy which provides that full word count is awarded for all documents, whatever their percentage of reprise, which is a seamless solution that avoids double dipping or double jeopardy. And a second proposal, which is that a second proposal that actually has two components to it. The first one is that program officers should be mindful of the reprise element in distributing the work among translators and revisers. And the second one was that managers duly consider factors other than productivity numbers, including quality, specialization, and extra duties, in assessing translators and revisers' performances and suitability for promotion, and managers be properly held accountable to that. So with respect to crediting, as you know, we have put forward a recommendation for crediting. First, that asks us to take a look at how the crediting practices are done in the duty stations with a view to harmonize them. We've made a second recommendation that has to do with authoring and taking a look at what are documents drafted in the Secretariat, outside of the Secretariat, are documents edited, are they not edited? And then the third proposal that we have put forward is that we have put forward a recommendation that a pilot project be put in place that will move away from the current system of reprise, as the current system of reprise is based on an obsolete technology, and move to one using Iluna. And so it's not possible to prejudge what are going to be the findings of the pilot project at this stage. The pilot project is going to be run in the Arabic translation service in New York, and the Russian translation section in Geneva, and in the French translation section in Vienna. And if any of our colleagues in Nairobi are interested, we'd be happy to share the documentation with them about what the pilot project is going to be and how we have not yet, we cannot review reprise. The second proposal, let me go, I want to try and handle both of them at the same time, if that's okay. About programming offers being mindful of reprise and distributing work. I would say that this is certainly the case in Geneva. I understand that it's also the case in Vienna as well. In Geneva, we have an evaluation unit where we measure the percentage of reprise by section. This information clearly appears in GDoc. Programming officers can also use Iluna to supplement the evaluation, and in some cases they will even consult with the focal points, the focal points on certain specific areas. So when we assign documents, we certainly take into account both reprise but also specializations, and we also try and organize additional substantive training to support staff specialization. Having said that, staff need to be capable of translating in different areas as well. It's rare that someone would be, that we could afford to have someone specialize in one area, that there would be enough work throughout the year, and that the work would be spread throughout the year, completely throughout the year. And then for the second part of this second proposal, I would certainly say that managers do consider other factors than productivity when assessing suitability for promotions. In Geneva, we conduct tests and interviews. In our testing panels and in our interview panels, we always include managers from other duty stations. And so I would certainly say that productivity is not the only factor that goes into the selection. And I think Doris shared her experience with us as well, that was the case. So would anybody like to address proposals number 4, which were indeed 2 proposals, and if you have any further comments or questions? Rima, go ahead.
Thank you, Michelle. Just to confirm that, yes, productivity is never, almost never, taken into consideration, when we do promotions or we do selections. Simply, from a fairness point of view, if we have an external candidate and an internal candidate, we know the productivity of the internal candidate, but we do not know how the external candidate, is performing productivity-wise. So this is never taken into consideration when considering a selection. Now, if I have several internal candidates and the justification, that I'm going to propose to the USG through Cecilia, I will put comparative criteria, and I would like also to highlight here that it is the USG who decides on the selection, not me, not the director of the division. It is the USG who decides on the selection. We only recommend. That's one thing. Second, I confirm that in New York also we have tests for candidates, and successful candidates in a test, they go through a competency-based interview. These are the rules, and the rules are followed to the letter. So there are other instances who review the recruitment process, the CRB, the CRP, the CRC, and everything is scrutinized. So the idea that a manager can decide whatever he or she wants to decide is not correct. It doesn't work this way. At least it doesn't work this way anymore. So that was my comment on the regarding the programming officers. Again, I think, colleagues do not really have a clear idea about what a programming officer function is. A programming officer is somebody who is very, very well versed in the documentation. At least in New York, they know the documentation. They know what is recycled, what is not. They know who can do what and in what time. And the programming officer cannot only take one criteria into consideration. The programming officer has a deadline, and the deadline has to be upheld. He or she will go for the most efficient way of processing a document, taken into consideration the recycling text, taken into consideration the specialization, taken into consideration who is fast enough to finish this document on time. So, let's not look at the programming officer as somebody who is just throwing documents left, right, and center. It doesn't work this way. And I really would encourage, colleagues to kind of get more information about how the documentation is managed before kind of making assumptions about who does what and why. Thank you.
Thank you, Rima. Would anyone else like the floor? Vlad and then Azucena.
Yeah, thank you. Just I wanted to add that productivity is not taken into account in the selection process, but it is taken into account when the application for promotion is submitted. So the candidate is supposed to submit 2 latest e-passes, which must be at least successfully meets So it is by default that those candidates who successfully meets expectations, at least, or exceeds expectations, are taken into account by Inspira. That's a little addition. Over to you.
Thank you. Azucena?
Thank you, Michelle. Not just to confirm that in Vienna, basically we do the same. I mean, for recruitment and promotion, we have a written test, we have an interview, and we take, the big picture. So we take into consideration all the competencies of candidates and not just productivity. I'm not even sure productivity is mentioned in the EPAS. So that's one thing. The other thing concerning programming officers, although we are a small structure, we are dealing with the same challenges as in New York. Anyway, programming officers, well, they have to balance timeliness, efficiency. I mean, so of course they take into consideration the level of reprise. They can have this information from the DCPMS, but they can also use Iluna, and they very well know who is doing a lot of reprise and who is not doing a lot of reprise. And so when we look at the productivity figures in our sections, we are very well aware what each staff member is doing and contributing to the global effort. So someone who has a higher productivity maybe had more reprise lately, so we know, okay, that's because of reprise. And someone who has a lower productivity is because the person has been doing very technical documents. So we are, I think, very flexible and accommodating to that in that respect. But yes, and in programming officers, they try to balance everything: specialization, deadlines, reprise. Of course, the most important is the efficiency. If the document is quite urgent, then we will probably choose we know the colleague who is faster, who is more, but it's exactly the same exercise as in New York and Geneva. So we're not, as Rima said, just throwing documents around. We're trying to make the best choice under the circumstances.
Thank you, Azucena. I see that Cecilia and Maite have asked for the floor. Maite first, perhaps, and then Cecilia. Is that okay? Maite, go ahead.
Thank you. I just would like to remind everybody in the working group that staff reps in this group represent staff. And as such, we convey their views and their concerns. So it's not necessary. I mean, it is our view. I mean, what we're saying, we stand behind it. But I just want to remind that there's all the staff that we're representing as well. It's not just the 5 of us. So that's one thing. And I thought that was the point, that we had to share staff views and concerns. And that's what we're doing. So just that's first point. If we say something like managers should take into consideration, technical, I mean, what the staff are doing, if it's technical, etc., on top of productivity, it is because some staff believe that it's not the case. Now, if it is the case, and it is their perception that it's not, then that's not on the staff member. I mean, that is on their managers to better communicate, I mean, how they manage performance, how they evaluate, assess them. It's not all on the staff. It's also, and again, if they have that perception, it's not only their fault. So, and about programming officers, we all said that I mean, and me, I was the first one to say them in New York. They were my friends. I love them to death. I know they're very competent. It's not about that, but you're asking us, where are the efficiencies, where we're giving you different ways. And so we just thought that we could share with you that sometimes it happens and it can count. And so, Yeah, I just felt that I need to remind all of you that we are representing staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Maite. Point well taken. Indeed, you are conveying the views and thoughts of everyone who has contacted you, and we do appreciate that you have taken on this task. I know that some of you were elected and ran for office, but some of you did not elect and run for office, and have offered to do this as well because you believe in what we're trying to achieve here, and in representing the voices of colleagues. We want to engage in this process, and I think that there's something something I'm sure we all have in common is that we want this process to be meaningful, and we want the work that we do to have a purpose. This is why we work. This is why we work for the United Nations, and we want it to be efficient and effective. And you have brought points to our attention, I just wanted to say that we're aware of this. We've taken note of it, and this is why 3 of the recommendations that we are making are addressing specific concerns that have been addressed by staff, and that's just what I wanted to say. Let me give the floor to Cecilia to make her last comment, and then I will just summarize what I'm hoping to achieve next time around. Thank you. Over to you, Cecilia.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Yeah, colleagues, I think that the conversations here are very valuable. And as Michelle said, we are taking every comment seriously, and we are following up in those that we cannot really, decide quickly if we need to do a study, for instance, on the reprise, or if we need to review the special assignments, etc., etc. We are going to do it. I'm a little bit worried, though, about, bringing the anecdotal to a meeting like this, like if it is like a generalization, especially, I'm thinking about somebody else reading the minutes of this meeting and, talking about colleagues in New York do not have work or need to wait for work, which is anecdotal. Because, with the productivity that we have, I mean, maybe I think that I could identify which service the complaints came, okay, from something that you have said, a service that had very difficult and challenging managing issues that now are being sorted out. And I would say that most of the conversation today is confirming that from the policy perspective, we have the same understanding. But that the issue that it is lacking there is why we don't have these conversations more, open in each translation service, in each duty station, because the programming officer, it looks like now he is or she is, destroying all the productivity of everybody, but the reality is that it's one of your colleagues, it's one of your constituents. It's, it's somebody like all of us. We are just working with the difficulties that we have, that sometimes, you have 3 or 4 phone calls and you cannot completely please the translator who didn't ask for work immediately, or, this is where I think that I'm a little bit concerned about how, the conversation is interesting and it's good to have this confirmation and ratification. But what I think is that maybe we should identify what are the real problems, and not the individual perceptions of some particular staff that presented as if it is like a big, concern, may give an impression that it is not correct, if you understand what I mean. That was just my concern, because we are discussing, about performance management, like we don't really know what to do performance management in our services, but none of the chiefs is going to tell you that productivity is only consideration, that quality is the only consideration, that timeliness. It's a combination. And of course, it all depends of individual situations. I mean, the year that you have a baby, and on top of that, the year you have a baby and the baby is sick, you cannot have the same productivity as if you have a 20 years old son in the university. So this is what I find a little bit concerning, is that we are going into, and I understand that you bring the concerns of your colleagues, but it will be, I would say, richer, the conversation richer, if we really address, like the big topics and not the individual cases of people complaining about that one time that they had to wait for a work. That's thing. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cecilia. It's 4:36. I see that Sheriff agrees with Cecilia. I'm going to wrap up the training session now, because I have another meeting to go to. So in anticipation of next week's meeting, sorry, not next week, the meeting on Thursday, what I'm hoping to achieve is I'm hoping that we will be able to go ahead and go over what I called proposals in Roman numeral 1, after you have reread the information that Azucena has sent to everyone. And then I understand that Sharif has some additional proposals that he would like to send us, and I'd like to invite him to send them to us today or tomorrow at the very latest, so that I will have time to prepare and review them. Otherwise, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation in this process. I know that it's not always easy, and I look forward to seeing you on Thursday. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thanks, Michelle. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.